the strengths and weaknesses of paid ministry. If you ever thought too much about contracts, you always want to read the little small fine print that's the disclaimer. You know what a disclaimer is? Well, my disclaimer today is I'm not an expert on this subject, but I have contacted some people that I've got great respect for, people like Ted Burleson and Dennis Jones and Bill Bagents and Dale Jenkins, to ask their thoughts on that, because I'd never dealt with this. And so they shared thoughts with me, and you'll hear some of those in it. So what I'm saying to you is this is not all my thoughts. I've gotten great minds involved in it to go along with my feeble mind. But the one thing that I did think of about this is that ministry is a vocation that one should choose with great thought, a passionate heart, and deep conviction for serving the Lord. And I believe most of you are here because of that conviction. Another thought I had was, and I've got three of them, main thoughts, that is paid ministry biblical? Is it scriptural? Is it a valid thing to be doing? Before you choose to do anything, you really should say, is this valid? And especially in ministry, you need to be thinking about, is what I'm going to propose or going to be doing, is it a valid question? And the reason you need to be thinking about that is because from time to time you may meet someone that will not think that paid ministry is a valid place for someone to be. You may think, what? But trust me, it could happen. If you'll turn in your Bibles to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 7 through 9, you'll notice that Paul there, writing to the church at Thessalonica, writes, "For you yourselves know how you ought to follow us, for we were not disorderly among you," and I'm reading out of the New King James, "nor did we eat anyone's bread free of charge, but worked with labor and toil night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you." And so Paul to the church at Thessalonica is just responding back to them to say that, first of all, when we were among you, we behaved orderly. Secondly, we labored day and night working with our own hands. And they did so in order to be good examples to them, and that they might look at them with favor. In other words, what Paul is saying, there may be an opportunity where you would need to preach for someone or be in ministry for someone where it wouldn't necessarily be a paid position. In fact, you would be doing the people a favor not to be paid. And I think that's what Paul is trying to say here about the church at Thessalonica. Secondly, Paul writes to the young preacher Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 17. And there in those verses he talks to them about the laborer. And he quotes Deuteronomy chapter 25 verse 4 that says, "Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treads out the corn." Now I understand that this is in regards to animals' rights, but it also carries over the idea that as a minister working in ministry and serving people, you have rights to be taken care of with your food and necessary things that are pertinent to that. You should enjoy the fruits of your labor. Then again in Luke chapter 10, verse 7 and 8, I'll back up probably there to verse 6, where Jesus is sending out the 70. He said, "And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest on it," and verse 6, "If not, it will return to you. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not go from the house to house. And whatever city you enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you." And basically Jesus is telling them, wherever you go to work and serve, live there and live off of the things that they provide for you. But I thought of a couple of things there, and that is, sometimes when you're in the ministry, or you're going, especially if you're going into mission fields, and those of you who've been to mission fields, you may be staying in someone's home, and they may be providing food for you, and you're one of those individuals that has a very delicate palate, that you just like certain things, and I honestly say that I'm one of those. But it's an idea that you need to go in that house and be respectful, and whatever they put in front of you, do your very best to eat it. Let me kind of give you an illustration. In 1995, I was going to Pakistan for the first trip, and I was with a congregation speaking and talking about what I was going to be doing and asking for them to help me. And of course, I opened it up for a question and answer session, and one of the first things someone asked me was, well, what are you going to eat over there? I said, you know, that's a good question, but I can tell you that what I will be eating is whatever they put in front of me, because I will not offend those brethren by not eating. One lady says, well, I hear they may cook snakes over there. I said, well, I hope they get them done and tasty. And of course, I didn't know, and somebody else told me later, said, I hear they have rats over there. I said, well, I hope they cook them really good, you know. And I just thought, you know, brethren can get such ideas, but the one thing that I went with was the mindset that I'm not going to go over there and offend those brethren by not eating their food. I don't want them to think I'm too good. Of course, it turns out that their main diet was rice. It might have a little bit of curried, barbecued, hot chicken broth over it, and so I eat it. They were nice enough. Most places we went, they toned it down for me from what they would normally eat. And I remember one night I learned very quickly that you better check the juice before you get too much of it on your rice, because if they passed it around, they hadn't gotten the message to this particular group where I was speaking in Faisalabad. And the sauce was really, 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 really hot. Hot, Wayne, like your sauce that you take to Mexico with, and they think it's too hot for them. And so I just got a little bit of it and sprinkled on mine just to give it flavor. But the driver was the last person to come in. And of course, he was a native of Pakistan, and he sat over on the far side in the dim lights, and he was the last man to get food. And buddy, I mean, he poured it on there. And he was really dark. And I noticed through the light as he started in on it, I looked, and there was just tears running down his cheeks. And he didn't understand a lot of English, but I looked at him and I said, ha, didn't And he just grinned even bigger. So, yes, ministry is valid, and it's valid to be paid in that ministry. Secondly, the question is, what are the weaknesses of paid ministry? I've got about 6 of those, and some are mine and some are other people's. First of all, the brethren might not listen to you since you're paid. I thought that was interesting. Dale Jenkins sent that one to me. The brethren might not listen to you since you're paid. And I thought, then, you know, the most important thing when you're preaching is to let them see Jesus in your preaching. And so that whether they are really not listening or not paying attention, you're preaching Jesus, and if they see Jesus in your message, then you've done what you're responsible for. Secondly, the brethren might begin to think they own you. Well, those of us who've been in ministry for long periods of time understand that thought, that sometimes when you get into a ministry position, they think that anything and everything they would ask of you is okay because you're paid. I mean, after all, the third thing I had to go along with that is they may think that we'll let him do this job or her do this job because they're paid to do this. And brethren do get a good sense that, well, why should we be doing that? Because aren't they paid? And it won't be unusual for you to go into maybe a smaller work as you go into your first work, where the brethren think most everything that needs to be done is something the preacher should be doing, because after all, he's paid or she's paid to do that. And I could illustrate that by some of the menial tasks that I've had. But it's really all about your attitude as you go into the particular place, and what are you willing to do. And if you think about, well, now wait a minute, let me see here. I didn't agree to do this and this and this, and I didn't agree to do that, so I'm going to tell the brethren I don't do those things. On the other hand, if you go into the ministry position thinking, you know, this building is the Lord's, the work is the Lord's, my serving is for the Lord, what can you do? And I've used the illustration that I had a family come to visit. They were really not happy where they were, and they come to visit, and they come on a day to talk to me about the church there and where, what they could expect of us. And when they walked in, I just happened to be, it was a cleaning day, and a few of the members were there, and I had the toilet brush in my hand. And the first thing he asked me, he says, "Where's the minister?" And I said, "What do you need?" You need to learn that one too. And he said, "Well, I just want to meet with him, and my wife and I talk to him about the ministry here and possibly our becoming part of this." And I said, "Well, I'm the minister." He looked down at the brush. He said, "Are you sure?" I said, I'm pretty sure." He said, "Well, I never knew a minister that cleaned toilets." I said, "Well, you met one now." And that brought great respect for him, because he thought, well, here's a guy, because he said, well, the congregation that I'm coming from, the minister didn't think he needed to do anything outside the building and very little inside the building. And if anybody was doing anything, he needed to be in his office studying. And so, it could be a weakness that they look at you and think, well, you should do that because you're paid. Another weakness is that it might cause the preacher to have the wrong motive in ministry. I guess this is the one I get the most concerned about. Paul said to the church at Philippi, chapter 1, verse 15, "Some indeed preach Christ from envy and strife, and some also of goodwill." And so we need to be the kind of people, as we go out to preach, that even though it may be a weakness, we don't let it become a weakness. We're preaching because we want to glorify God with our service and with our work. And we want to build a kind of hearts and minds that are receptive to doing whatever we need to do in order to get the work done. Now, I think you should understand that you may be the kind that's here thinking that I'm going to get all the lessons I can get. I'm going to get all the knowledge I can get. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to really browbeat the brethren into doing what they need to do. Well, if that's your attitude, thanks, Ricky. I appreciate you grinning on that one. If you think that's the attitude you're going to have and that's the way you're going to accomplish things, wake up. Smell of coffee. You can't make, you can't force, you can't guilt people into doing things. You've got to preach to them about Jesus and about the right attitudes, and hope that you can lead them to where they need to be. I had one of our former professors that was here when I was here, he's died and gone on to heaven. Brother David Underwood had a preacher training class when I was here, and he would tell us on a regular basis, "Boys," and I really appreciate that because I was not quite that boy age, but I always enjoy that one, and you'll enjoy it as you get older. And he said, "Your job as a preacher is to, wherever you go, is to take them brethren where they are and lead them to where they need to be." And I've always remembered that, and that's been a lot of years since I was in school, David. And I believe that's still true. If you go into the congregation or you go into the ministry where you're going and you have an understanding that my job is to take people from where they are and lead them to where they need to be, to get them closer to God, to get them closer to Jesus, and let them understand that if they'll have a servant's heart and they'll allow God to be part of their life and operate in their life the way it should be, they can do great things for the cause of Christ that they never even imagined. And so I guess one of my great concerns is that we, and I think is a weakness, is that you can develop the wrong attitude for ministry. If you allow yourself to work and serve the Lord and do it with joy, nothing that I've said about weaknesses can become a problem for you. They will all become strengths, and you'll find a way. So then, what are the strengths in ministry? Well, paid ministry allows a man to devote more time. That's significant. But I've got a little caution bar I think needs to go along with it. And I say this because those of us who work here, and even those that are in other ministry places, know that sometimes they get calls for a minister. We'll get calls regularly. Philip Gold handles a lot of those, but Dennis will get calls, I'll get calls, Rusty will get calls. Ted probably gets calls. If you're working in a ministry position, Bill Bagents gets calls, and they'll say, we need a minister. What do you think about so-and-so? I've had elderships call me and tell me in years gone by, we'd like for you to send us somebody, but we don't want anyone like the last two we've had. And of course, I just got automatically asked, well, what kind have you had? Well, let's just put it this way: they're lazy. Okay. I had a call one time from an eldership. I'm a native of Kentucky, and this was from a congregation in Kentucky, size about 100, 110 members. And the elder on the other end of the phone, as we're talking, he says, Brother Jim, I'd like for you to send us a student, a graduate, somebody that could work in ministry that can help us and help us grow. He said, I don't want the one like came last weekend. I didn't remember sending anybody out. I didn't know exactly how this individual come across it, but anyway, I said, well, can you tell me a little bit about what you don't want? And he said, well, as an eldership, we were looking for someone we thought we would be able to work with, and someone that would be able to at least have enough respect to trust our judgment on some things. And I said, well, so what was there this past weekend? He said, well, let me just put it this way. He said, this individual got out of the car talking and didn't stop talking about what he knew, what he could do, who he was, the entire weekend that he was here until he got in the car and left. He said, we never had a chance to tell him anything. So he said, consequently, we know that we're not going to be able to have input with that individual. Fortunately, I had someone that I could send to them that would, and went and stayed with them about 4 or 5 years, did a great job with them, and left them with a good feeling about Heritage Christian University. So what am I saying? Don't be a lazy minister. Don't be arrogant thinking you know it all. Have enough humility to understand that these men in eldership, number one, are in that position because the congregation had confidence in them, and they would like to have input with you and be able to give you some recommendations from time to time. Number two, it should cause you to develop a greater sense of thankfulness, knowing you are serving regardless of who pays you. And I thought of that one because you may be going into a mission field. And in that mission field, you'll be working with the congregation, but not necessarily being paid by that congregation, but being paid by another congregation. So consequently, you may have a dual set of bosses in a sense. My first work out of Heritage was into a mission field, and I was very, very thankful and appreciative of the congregation at Florence Boulevard in Rogersville and my home congregation up in Kentucky supporting me in that work. And I understood that that group of people that I started with, and as they grew and had the rights to recommend certain things and request certain things, but I also knew that Florence Boulevard and Rogersville and the other congregation had rights and responsibilities that they saw that I wasn't doing certain things that I should do. So as that I needed to be listening to all people in all locations, understanding that I needed to be thankful that someone thought enough of me to be willing to send me into a mission field. The third thing is, I believe it's important and a strength for us as ministers to understand who we really serve. I thought about the words of Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, when he said, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherein you are called, with all lowliness and meekness, with patience, forbearing with one another in love. Now, I understand that he's writing to the church, and it's primarily about them walking according to who they serve in order to have a sense of unity. But I believe that it's a strength that if we understand who we serve, as we go out of here in ministry, regardless of who you are, that number one, we're serving God Almighty, first and foremost. And that as I go into this ministry position, wherever it may be, youth ministry, pulpit ministry, educational ministry, children's ministry, serving along with a husband, that I'm serving God first and foremost. And He sent His Son to die for me. And whatever I do and wherever I go and however I act and whatever I think and whatever I say needs to be worthy of the Savior that died for me. I want you to think about that for a minute. Because you can get in all kinds of situations where you go. And if you'll always remember who you serve, it won't matter what's said about you, to you, you're serving the Lord. And folks, I've been in frustrating positions. And I have to remember, I've gone to my office and sit down and get to thinking about it, and I think, well, maybe I need to move on. But I think, wait a minute, I'm serving the Lord. And I'm trying to serve these people, and maybe I need to adjust my attitude and find out that it works. I've struggled through difficult times where I really thought maybe where we didn't have elders, and I thought maybe the guy wants to run me off. And I just got my little hard-headedness up, and I thought, I'm serving the Lord here, and I'm going to hang in here and hang on and show them that I'm going to stick with him. He's going to have to come to me and boldly say, I believe you need to move on. What was encouraging to me was sticking through that ministry and getting through on the other side, because I had the willingness to walk worthy of the one that I was serving, is I believed that I grew and they grew as a congregation, and this individual grew. In fact, it was interesting to me when as I was coming back to Heritage in 1992, Dennis, one individual come in the office and sat down with me one day, and he said, for several years, I did not believe we communicated with each other very well. He said, but I believe for the last 2.5 to 3 years, I thought we communicated really well. I said, well, that's interesting. And I think that's a great observation, because I thought we communicated really well the first couple, 2.5 years, and we hadn't communicated very well the last 2.5 or 3. And we chuckled about that and shook hands and got it and went our separate ways. So how we looked at things, Number 4 is a paid servant of the Lord. It allows you the opportunity to take care of your family and help others. You've got a lot of opportunities to help people and encourage people and lift them up, but you have to be lifted up and encouraged yourself. 5, it allows you the opportunity to do things for members that others either can't or may not have the time to do. When you're paid full-time in ministry, and I do believe it's a strength, you may have the opportunity to take some people to the doctor that they don't have transportation. I remember taking a 95-year-old man to a doctor because his daughters couldn't get there to help him, and taking others other places, or going to the nursing homes, going to the hospitals, going to visit people where maybe their family wasn't close, and they just needed somebody to come and encourage them. I remember my first work was in Rogersville, Alabama. I got out there, and there were about 14 widow ladies shut in, sick, that never could make services. And I was still in school full time, and I thought, how in the world did I get to visit 14 ladies, go to school, do the youth ministry, do the educational ministry, fill in for Dennis Jones when he's gone? And I thought, well, I'll just divide it up. It's kind of like I told David the other day about syllabus. You get the syllabus the first week, remember, you don't have to do it all today. Nathan's classes will be a breeze when you divide it up. It won't be no big deal. Yeah, Wayne's classes, same way. Ed's class, you just divide it up. Don't try to do it all the first couple of days. And so I divided up the ladies that I needed to go see. And Dennis, not very many weeks went by that I didn't go out. I'd visit 7 one week and 7 the next. And when you spend a day, Fridays, I'd spend Fridays visiting these ladies, take all day on Friday, from morning till night. I can't tell you how many of those ladies were crying when I got there. Oh, really. And I'd go in, I'd sit down with a smile on my face, put my arm around, give them a hug. I'd say, I came to just visit you today. Before I'd leave, I'd say, let's read a scripture, and we'd have prayer, and then I'd try to find something humorous so that I could leave with them laughing. Go on to the next 7 the next week, and really and truly, although I didn't plan it that way, I felt like that was a very significant part of my ministry in the first year that I was at Rogersville, Alabama, or the 2 years I was there. And so you don't ever know when you're going to have an opportunity to serve someone and help someone and encourage someone that was not part of what they brought you in for. So that wasn't what they brought me in for originally. But it was a great opportunity to serve and encourage people. I believe, number 6, a strength of ministry is, and I know my time's just about up, it provides tremendous flexibility and opportunities for you to serve. But one little note of caution. Know when to say kindly no. It's not unusual for ministers to get into the work and forget that they can say no, and they neglect their families or their spiritual family at church. They get too involved with all these other things they just feel like they have to do. But you have a right to have family time. Caution, guard yourself on it. So what do we learn? Well, paid ministry is biblical and acceptable. There's a number of weaknesses to paid ministry. There's a number of benefits and strengths to paid ministry. The most important thing is you serve in ministry with the right heart, the right attitude, always being thankful and worthy of the one that you serve, knowing who that is. Think about the words of Paul in Philippians 3:13 and 14 when he said, I'll always be thankful for those who support and encourage me in the ministry. And he wanted to honor and build trust in everything that he did. And I want to mention that I've been in ministry now 30 years. I'm just a baby in that. We've got the guys here that have been in ministry a lot longer than that. But those of you who have support and encouragement from outside, remember that, because I'm still being supported by folks that believed in me back in 1983 when I started. And they still help me in ministry. Little did I know when I started out that I would be using that help year in and year out for 30 years.